And what is going on YouTube? Welcome back to another video, Career Tech, and today we'll be going over the Intel i9-11900 versus the Ryzen 5 5900X. Anyway, let's dive straight into the video. As confirmed by CES and a lot of other sources, the 11900K will feature 20 PCIe 4.0 lanes finally of Gen 4. So if you have an M.2, that's Gen 4, congratulations, you can finally put it on an Intel motherboard. I don't know if these new motherboards of the Z590 will be supporting 4th gen, but hopefully we will be able to use that and finally utilize that. Today we will be comparing the i9-11900K versus the Ryzen 9 5900X. The 11900K is a 8-core 16-thread processor versus the Ryzen 5 5900, which is a 12-core 24-thread processor. The i9-11900K has a 3.5 GHz base clock and up to a 5.3/4.8 turbo. I believe the all-core turbo is 4.8 and the thermal velocity boost is 5.3 GHz. Compared to the Ryzen 5 5900X, which is a 12-core 24-thread processor with 105 watt TDP, which clocks up to around, I believe, 4.8 GHz if I'm correct, or 4.9. I'm pretty sure that's the correct gigahertz. And the 11900K will be on Cypress Cove core architecture built on Intel's 14 nanometer process. As you see down here in the slides, the i9-11900K will be supporting up to 3200 speed RAM using the AVI decoder support, and will also be using the new chipsets coming out of the new motherboards such as EVGA, the Z590 series, and all the 500 series motherboards. And this CPU will also be backwards compatible with any 400 series motherboards, so that is great news to hear for any Intel fans out there at the moment. And now, what we're all here for is for gaming performance. Produced by CES21 by Intel, their slide shows that they beat the Ryzen 5 5900X in all these games in terms of Assassin's Creed, Far Cry New Dawn, Cyberpunk 2077, Metro Exodus, and just to name a few, Gears of War 5. Beats it around 5%, 4%, 8%. Not that big of a difference in performance. It's probably what we would expect from Intel being on 14 nanometer plus squared, and honestly not that impressive to me at the moment. But this is early on sample, so maybe they can pull a little bit more performance out of the CPU. Down here we'll see that all the specs of the current test benches, the 11th gen i9-11900K will be running off of a MSI Z490 Godlike, not the Z590, so the Z590 is not out yet. BIOS version is the highest it can be, 32 gigs of DDR4 at 3200 MHz. Samsung 970 EVO 1TB running off a 1080p monitor using Microsoft Windows 10 Pro, and the same graphics card, which is the RTX 3080 EVGA XC3, and using the graphics drivers from NVIDIA, the 460.79. I don't know if there's a newer one, but I'm going to go check that. Versus the Ryzen 5 5900X, which is 105 watt, 12 core 24 thread, using the Asus Crosshair from the X570. BIOS version is 2702, and using the same amount of memory, the same storage, the same resolution, same operating system, and the RTX 3080. Anyway, let's see what it performed in Metro Exodus. On the left, I believe that is the Intel 11900K, and on the other one, that is the Ryzen 5 5900X. In terms of FPS, they are both similar, but this is because Metro Exodus, and this is only one game, however, so certain games like to favor other CPUs, but Metro Exodus isn't one of them. But you can see just how close the single-threaded performance is, and how much gaming is actually affected by the graphics card, as well as the CPU itself. As we move down, we will also see more Metro Exodus scores, as Intel is actually gaining a little bit of performance over AMD by around 8 FPS. Now, I know that doesn't seem like a lot. It is not a lot at all, because this is how it was with the i9-9900K, and just barely outperforming the Ryzen CPUs in single-threaded, keeping their single-threaded crown. As you see down here, you see kind of like the dies and all of that. Not something that we should really be interested in. We're all just interested in how performance is. So anyway, let's get on to the next slide. This is the Intel i9-11900K versus the i9-10900K, its predecessor mainstream. And here's the testing platform for these CPUs, however. Using the Asus ROG Strix RTX 3090, a Z490 motherboard, clocked at 3600 MHz CL16 RAM, and both processors were overclocked to 5.2 GHz. So this test was using a lot more higher end spec systems compared to the previous Metro Exodus review or test scores that we saw just now. As we go down to CPU-Z, they both have the i9-10900K and the i9-11900K working and scoring. The i9-11900K beats the 10900K in single-threaded performance, but loses in multi-threaded. Now, I know what you're all saying. How can it lose in multi-threaded score when it's a newer CPU? It's because of the cores and threads. The Intel i9-11900K is an 8-core 16-thread part compared to the i9-10900K, which is a 10-core 20-thread processor. Not only does the 10900K have more cores and more threads, but also the 11900K has less, meaning the multi-thread score will be going down because it just cannot compete with that amount of cores and threads with less cores and threads itself. And as we move down to GPU-Z, we can confirm that the graphics channel is running at PCIe Gen 4 mode and not at PCIe Gen 1, which was a problem back a couple weeks ago on an engineering sample of the i9-11900K running at PCIe X16 1.1, which was hindering FPS modes and games and performance. The i9-10900K was running at PCIe Gen 3 compared to PCIe Gen 4. There's not that big of a difference between X16 3.0 and X16 4.0, so we should not see that big of a difference in performance in FPS games and any other games compared to each other. Right now we have Cinebench. This is the lines of test that we have off of video cards. Thank you video cards for all these leaks and articles. Right now we have Cinebench R15, Cinebench R20, and Cinebench R23. The Core i9-11900K scores a 250 single-threaded and a multi-core score of 2356. And the Cinebench R20 scores a 1610 and a 5672, and Cinebench R20 scores a 1582 and a 138064 in multi-threaded. And now moving on to the 10th gen Core i9 from last year, scoring in all three categories less in single-threaded, but outperforming it in multi-threaded. This is a very weird kind of situation Intel is in. Not only pushing yourself back to 8 cores and 16 threads because you cannot produce that on the 14 nanometer yields, but now you're losing more performance in multi-threaded, and you're already losing to the Ryzen 5 5900X, which beats the Intel's highest gen CPUs in multi-thread performance. Now as we move down to 3D Mark, we have Fire Strike Extreme, Time Spy, and Time Spy Extreme. As you see, the 11th gen Intel CPU scores are 31,294, 19,000, 11,000, and 8289 in all these tests, compared to the i9-10900K, actually beating it in 3 of the categories compared to the 11th gen part. All these are running on those same specs and systems that I mentioned earlier, the RTX 3090, the 3600 MHz RAM at CL16. Honestly, if I'm coming from my own consumer standpoint, I'm very disappointed. Intel has not stepped up their game. Hopefully, 12th gen comes out, they will finally be on a different processing node, hopefully putting better performance in single-threaded and multi-threaded. But right now, it seems like the 10900K might be a better choice than the 11900K. And even an i9-9900K might be even better, as it is $300 at Micro Center if you guys want to go check that out. And as we get closer to the launch date, which will be in March, the 11900K will be priced around $500 if trends from last year's generation show the 10900K being around $500 something as well. Honestly, if I had to choose between the 11900K versus a Ryzen 5 5900X, I just have to go with the Ryzen 5 5900X, not because I'm a bandwagon or not because I'm an AMD shill or an Intel shill or whatever you guys call others out there. It's just for the matter of fact of price to performance and just efficiency in terms of temperature. this i9 11900K is going to be running really toasty, and you're going to need an AIO, and sometimes it's not really good with productivity benchmarks. I need productivity because I do exporting, video rendering, editing videos, and I just need something that can export my videos really fast in the amount of time. 4K 1440p videos that take almost hours for my GPU right now to even try to export. Now, it does come down to consumer preference and price now, because CPUs have been getting so competitive to the point that now the consumer has to make a choice. Which one do you want? Do you want to go with the trend, or do you want to go kind of away from the trend? If you're just going to be playing for gaming, then go ahead and buy yourself an Intel CPU. You're not going to be missing out on anything because you're just an average consumer. Now, if you're more than just the average gamer and you do some productivity work, and you might overclock your CPU, or you might do a little bit more with it, then the Ryzen 5 5900X might be a better choice for you if you're really into PC building and all of that. And also, if you're a great overclocker too, you might want to go with the 11900K, which has a higher binning and just push to the maximum for gigahertz performance. Honestly, Intel just hasn't been able to perform like they used to back in the past because they had no competition. But with faced with competition, I'm just seeing lackluster performance, and I just don't know how to feel about this 11900K coming out compared to a 5900X. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys learned a lot. Make sure you leave a like and comment down below any other ideas for videos. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Keep on gaming, and peace out.